another edition of the RF Video Shoot Interview Series. We're joined today by Arn Anderson in his home in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a pleasure to be here. You've been all over the world. You've wrestled in NWA, WCW, of course, right now, the World Wrestling Federation, Georgia Championship Wrestling, New Japan. You've done it all, and I definitely want to ask you, I guess my first question would be asking you how you got started in the wrestling business.
Well, first of all, Rob, welcome to my home.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. It's always a pleasure to give fans a little knowledge of the person behind Arn Anderson, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So back to the question.
You got hooked up with Junkyard Dog, I believe, sort of to get into the business, or something?
There's a story that goes there. We should probably back up a little bit from there. I actually started going to Atlanta television, which was then called the NWA, Georgia Championship Wrestling. I went down, I wrestled some TV matches, and I happened to wrestle Bob Armstrong and Brad in a TV match, and obviously pretty much got pounded.
Right.
But Bob saw something in me and maybe potential or diamond in the rough or whatever, and following that match, Bob went back to Pensacola, where he became part of the booking committee and booking office down there, talent relations. Called me and asked me if I'd like to come down and for a few weeks work. So I went down and worked about 3 weeks for Southeastern Championship Wrestling. When that little stint was over, he said, "Listen, Bill Watts is over in Louisiana. I think he would like a guy like you. What do you think?" I said, "Bob, this is what I want to do, you know. Please, anything you can do." He sent me over to do a couple of TVs. Went over. Bill asked me to come back and put me to work. 5.5 months. I worked for him, strictly first match, all the way, just learning. I didn't know anything.
Right. Were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The biggest. God, you know, I was the kid at 8, 9 years old, would put on a ski mask, put a shoelace down in my underwear, call one of my buddies down, he'd come in the front door, I'd jump off the couch and strangle him to death. The worst. I was the worst. It's all I ever wanted to do from day one. Consequently, being such a huge fan, for Bob Armstrong, who was one of my heroes, to take an interest in me was flabbergasting. Anyway, where the Junkyard Dog story comes in is, at the end of that 5.5 months, it was time, because guys in those days went from territory to territory, and the length of stay in an underleaf slot was probably 6 months tops. Matt Bourne, who was with Ted DiBiase on top, as part of the Rat Pack with himself, Doug, and DiBiase, Matt Bourne was heading to Atlanta, and he needed a partner. We were at TV one day, and they were kicking it around. I just happened to be sitting there, and he said, "I need a partner for Bourne, you know. Dog, what do you think?" He said, "Bill." And that voice of his, "Bill, kid looks just like Ole Anderson. That's an Anderson. Send him with him, make him an Anderson." Bill looked at me and said, "I'll get on the phone." It was Junkyard Dog's idea, and I owe him. God bless him. Rest in peace. He was a good man.
Right.
That was my first break. He got a hold of Ole. Ole said, "Let me have a look at the kid." That's where he brought me in with Bourne and renamed me from Marty Lundy, as to who I am, to Arn Anderson. Ole gave me the name.
What was Ole like as a booker in Georgia?
Tyrant, loud, intimidating, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly fair, had tunnel vision, and probably was the one guy that I was the most afraid of in the wrestling business. Intimidated me to no end.
What about Bill Watts? Because it sounds like you're talking about Bill Watts, but you're actually talking about
Same thing.
Right.
Again, I knew Bill Watts strictly as a fan up until that point. Then I knew him as the boss. Bill had I guess Bill was a man's man and always had been, plus the fact that Bill was always the boss.
Right.
So he held your future in his hands. And a lot of guys would not rock the boat. In those days, you didn't cross the boss, period. Number one, God knows what it would have cost you physically, financially, and if they blackballed you in those days, if you were a troublemaker, I mean, what are you going to do, whack the boss?
Right.
What's the next guy going to do, the next promoter? Bring you in knowing that you whacked the last guy? Bill was pretty intimidating too, equally as much as Ole, I would say.
Right, right. Now in Georgia, you teamed up with Ole and Tommy Rich. I think you worked some matches with the Road Warriors, right?
Yep.
What were they like?
Actually, the first, after Bourne and I split up, he pretty much went his way, I went my way. Ole really couldn't figure out, that's where the tunnel vision comes in. We were brought in to be in the tag slot. We were going to go for the national tag titles, which were the big belts and the territory, Ole's territory at that time. About a week or two before that, some things happened. Bourne was let go. Ole couldn't see me in any other light. So he went up and he found the Road Warriors in the gym in Minneapolis, which was the break of a lifetime for those guys. He brought them down. They were big, incredibly strong, incredibly green, incredibly dangerous. And the first matches were, we had a 10-day tour. It was Barry Darsow, who was Man Mountain Darsow at that point, myself, and Joe Lightfoot, Indian, about this tall, great guy and tremendous wrestler. We wrestled the Road Warriors, and let me see who the partner was. I want to say Rick Rude. That's possible. We went around for 10 days, and they almost killed us. I mean, they were animals. What can I say? Joe was a 600 bencher. I'm sure Hawk was right around 5. Intense as anybody I've ever seen. You know, it was a tremendous learning experience because from that point on, no matter how bad it got in the ring, the rest of my career wasn't as bad as it was those 10 days.
So you saw the money potential in the Road Warriors back when they first got into the business.
Oh, they were incredible. People instantly were in awe of them. They were kind of the first team of that magnitude and that size. I mean, there were some big teams, but never physique-wise, to my memory as a fan. I never saw a distinct team that stayed together. I mean, there were individuals that came along before them, obviously, you know, the Putskys, the Tony Atlases and those guys, but singles, but to have two.
Right.
Oh, and you put Ellering with those guys, they were meant to be a cash cow, and obviously they were.
Who are some other guys that you worked with in Georgia that stand out in your mind?
Several learning processes. Rich, of course, was the greatest babyface, I think, of his time. Incredible wrestler. Tommy could drink all night, wrestle all night, stay up all night, never go to the gym, ever, and he was always just right there. Boom, boom, boom. Larry Zbyszko at that time, I learned a tremendous amount from him. Sitting talking to him, knowledge. He was real and is real savvy as far as the business goes. Paul Orndorff gave me a quote in the gym that I lived by my entire career. I was in there working out, and he had watched a few matches with Bourne and I as partners. And he came up to me and said one day, he said, "Been watching you." He said, "You got potential." He said, "You stay in the gym, keep your body right, you learn how to talk, you learn how to wrestle, and they can't deny you. Carry that with you." Greatest bit of advice I ever had. And Paul was on his way out, heading to the WWF, and we know that story.
Right, right. Now, were you ever discouraged because you never had the bodybuilder's type of body? You were like, you know, you weren't a big muscle guy of your size.
Discouraged? No. I felt like, you know, when I came in the business, I was about 6'1", about 255, and I'd done some powerlifting and was stronger than the average bear walking around on the streets. But you walk in this business, you know, a guy that size is right in the middle of the road. Not a small guy, not one of the bigger guys. I felt I was big enough to hold my own with most guys. I was more concerned with learning the wrestling end of it, because I saw the success that a lot of guys had. And I figured if I could master that part of it, I was strong enough, not quick enough, but quick enough,
right,
to overcome any shortcomings I might have. And the one thing that I knew I was a student of the business. I would, do everything I had to, watch every match I had to, and to improve. And I figured I could overcome anything.
Who would you consider some of your mentors back then? Would it be Ole or?
Oh, absolutely. Bourne taught me a lot in the short time. I should probably